Hello everybody, my name is Dusan. My mother gave me the name, but I like to call myself Develoger. I blog, I run NPM scripts, I run running races, and I really enjoy the front end, so thank you for being here. As on all these talks, there's always some stupid speaker that wants to make a joke, so I will try also to make one. So, you know, there is this can. If you don't pay attention to the accessibility, it's your product. There is no opener. So, I mean, I like baked beans, but I just cannot taste it, so that's basically the internet for most of the users. Anyway, you can find me on Twitter. Lately I'm not so active, but I promise I will be. You can find me on my website, the same thing. And yeah, let's start. So today I'm going to talk about the keyboard navigation in the age of the touchscreens. This is kind of a clickbait title, but the subtitle is even more clickbait. And I'm really proud about this thing. How I put the JavaScript into the Vinci. So I work and I work in Smava at the moment. It's basically like an e-commerce solution for loans. We are a very happy family, kind of. When I came to the company, there were just like 2 front-end developers. Now it's 15. So we needed to scale in various directions, and especially in the direction of creating our UI. And part of UI is obviously the accessibility, and since our stack is React, I mean our future and our upcoming stack is React, we decided to build a reusable component library. And I mean, that's kind of the best way to implement the accessibility throughout these small components. And if you just put it on the smallest scale, you just, you know, you don't care much. You have a quick wins, and I really honestly recommend going with building the stupid UI components, which you later on just implement and iterate in all your projects. So the first question regarding the keyboard navigation is who is pressing these keys? I mean, who are the targeted audience, and what does it mean for them? And yeah, I'm also kind of proud of this. This is not me, even though I was born in the 80s. But the point here is I'm actually a father of 3 small children and a husband, which I'm really proud of, both. And I was really surprised when my oldest son first time saw a monitor, which we didn't have in our apartment. And then there was a YouTube grid and the videos and stuff, and he stood up and started pressing the freaking screen, which was not touch screen. So I then realized that basically for him it's a natural way to go. I mean, it's because of course I gave him the freaking mobile first, not so much, but I gave him. So, but I kind of rewinded back and remember how I was this kid almost, and how he basically, you know, had the Commodore, not the Apple, and there was just a keyboard. I mean, literally, Commodore was just a keyboard, and then you stick it into the TV. So basically, the point is that the kids of the 80s has this natural way to go of usage to keyboard, and kids of the not 80s have the natural way of touching things. So at the end, you know, they are going to grow up, and as the natural way, again, to go with the people, they're not going to change. I mean, what they learn once, they're going to stick to it, and they will always hate what is new, kind of, maybe. But these people actually do, you know, it's really hard for them to change most of the time. So, yeah. So, even though today we have a talk about screen reader, when I saw it, I was really careful what to talk about, because initially in my talk, screen reader was also included. So I tried to remove it as much as possible. So the first point is that keyboard navigation is not equal to screen reader navigation. And why so? To understand this, it's to understand the targeted audience. the screen reader audience is mainly visually impaired people. What does that mean? That people who are blind or like partially blind or have any issues with their eyesight, like me. I mean, I wear eyelashes, but if I remove them, I'm totally wasted. So when I say like keyboard navigation, I think about the people who are mostly like users by choice, and when I say screen reader, that's like a user by need. Okay, so there is this magical thing called area, and I'll just briefly touch it, the subject. So these area attributes, they're kind of partially also interesting for us on the keyboard navigation, which is not part of the screen reader, but mostly used for the screen reader. And generally, you know, in the beginning there was HTML, and people were really happy about it. People like standards. I mean, people, not developers. And you know, the HTML just showed to be insufficient, and there was just not standard for many things that you needed to create custom. And if you create custom elements, you will need basically some kind of a definition to the this thing, or how it can actually understand that it's a custom checkbox or it's a custom whatever. Otherwise, it's just going to see divs and spans and whatever. So this is a very good point. I'm very happy how I put it, place it out. So without area roles, the screen reader is blind. Basically, you try to open up some website which is not smala.de because at the moment our main web page is still the old one and it's not so accessible, sadly, but that's going to change. And I mean, it's basically going to do that. I mean, with this area roles, with all sorts of attributes, you're going to tell to the screen reader what this page is all about and the elements. And now to think about the world outside the screen reader and inside of the keyboard navigation. So there is a very important thing to point out too, is that on the web and the internet, the default behavior is almost always the best behavior. You know, if you change the default behavior on your website or web application, the behavior that actually users expect, most probably you will end up with a bad UX, and they're just not going to understand it. So if you are on the web page and you just, I actually placed this quite wrong because the tab should be first, but then visually it will not look cool. And basically, like, you know, everybody knows here, I guess, that with tab and tab shift you can just go through the elements which are focusable. That's important to say. And going forward and back and so on. With enter, you're going to follow the link or trigger an action or button. And this is very important to know, like follow a link and trigger an action on a button. Remember that, we're going to get back to it. And of course, like the space, you can also scroll down. The space also has some special behaviors on the buttons especially. I will show it, well, no, I will not show it actually because we have some technical difficulties. Anyway, let's move on. So this is the magical thing, it's called like tab index. If you don't know what it is, I just briefly touch it. Back in the days when I started, it's like a long time ago in some galaxy which was really different, you know. I mean, there was no ES6, there was no nothing. You were just like using the tables, and yeah, it was fun, I guess. And basically, then people introduced this tab index thing and made all the elements potentially focusable, which is very important for the navigation we are going to implement. And this number is really funny, you know, because the tab index must be like equal or less than this. And that's just, the reason is actually a technical limitation on how the numbers are stored somewhere. It's out of my expertise. So there are a couple of ways to handle this. First is to set the tab index equals 0 to everything, and then basically the ordering of the elements into the DOM is going to dictate the order of the navigation. Now that comes the funny part. So if you use the positive rule values, that means if you just play with them and use like 4, 5, or 3, you will be able to force the user to jump around your application, which is not particularly great. It's kind of compared to the ways of the Flexbox and nowadays the ways of the CSS grid, when you can basically reorder the appearance of the element on the page in a different way than they are basically positioned in a DOM, which is quite a bad practice, and it can mess up the whole accessibility a lot. But anyway, the important thing about this, if you use the 0 together with the positive values, the 0 is, I mean, can you guess where the 0 is going to come? It's actually going to come to the way end, you know. So it's by specification, and it's, I mean, it's just, if you get like 4, 5, 3, and 0, the 0 is going to come last in your tab index order on navigation, which is quite weird, but that's the way it is. So you can also put a negative value, which is like usually -1, and that element is focusable, not visually focusable with the tab, but you can focus it with the keyboard, sorry, with the JavaScript, which is sometimes useful. And yeah, now we talk about the KeyCode part. This is very important, very interesting to talk about, because what you can do in this keyboard navigation, what usually you're going to do is you're basically listen to the events in JavaScript, and then you basically check if the current event fired on some particular element on the document body or whatever is equal to 69, then you will know that character E was pressed. And then basically you do something. And luckily enough, you know, I mean, this is kind of the whole, not whole, it's just like the first 24 characters. I actually took it from Wesbo's website, keycodes.info, and I mean, it's just ridiculous, you know, it's like a whole mapping of the freaking characters, and that's how he called them, you know. I mean, you can call them whatever at the end. And it's like 250 or something, it's like all the characters. So, but the problem with that is that you basically introduce a lot of JavaScript. You know, you add event listeners in this age of component-based development, especially React, Vue, and whatever. If you add some listeners which are outside of the scope of the component, and then you don't remove them when you unmount your component, you have a listener which stands there, and if it gets triggered, you basically get a memory leak. So it's bad. I mean, and as everybody was, when I was younger, was teaching me, it's like, you know, try to not to use JavaScript whenever you can, and so on and so on. I mean, that's particularly for UI, but in this case, this is UI at the end. So instead of listening for some particular events, like for example, you listen for the KeyCode event 13, that's enter, you can actually do it in a different way. You can add an on-click event to desired element, which is very useful, for example, for React, which we are very familiar with, and instead of basically mapping all this stuff additionally for your keyboard, you can just define it like this. And if it's a button and you have on-click, this handle click method will gonna be executed both on click and on pressing the enter, which is really, I mean, it's really cool. And how does it look? This is not React, but basically it's just some stupid example when I put a div and a button. And initially I created a small like a showcase, like a demo. But anyway, the code here can show you that basically if you have a button, there is no need for any kind of use case handling of the key code or whatever, and also, like in the case of the button, default behavior is when you press space on the button, like literally the space character. When the button is focused, the button will be triggered. So I mean, here you need also to map another conditional in order to achieve something like this. I mean, I apologize for the alert. It was just like a quick thing. So the built-in stuff, you know, I really like this frameworks and libraries, and I also don't like these frameworks and libraries because, you know, at one point they give you a lot and say like, you know, here is the really nice stuff, everything is easy, you just, you know, utilize it, you put it in your code and you consume it. On the other hand, you don't create this stuff, which is really fun. But then, you know, Vue.js, a friend of mine said to me today, like, you know, are you paid to promote this Vue.js? And I said, no, sadly. I actually just did some couple of, like, you know, projects with it. I love it, but for some reason I ended up with React, which is still okay. And in Vue.js you have a thing which are not part of the React, and maybe, you know, it's not like a decision maker, but sometimes, I mean, you can just say like, oh, cool, you know, these people handle the key events and a lot of other stuff which React doesn't have. So let's move on. So when you actually want to bind some JavaScript, and you need to do it because it's not always that you can do this this tab or wrapping button or wrapping like a link or something. Then by the MDN and actual common sense I came up with, I was very happy that these things were like aligned. It's particularly very good to use onKey down instead of using the onKey press, because in this horrible evil thing called Internet Explorer acts weird as always. So we come to the focus, you know. I know a lot of designers who really like, you know, their job until they come to this thing. And what the developers do? They do this. I mean, it's very dangerous, and I mean, on these meetups about accessibility, everybody repeats one thing. They say like locking out people, you know. And I mean, it's really true, it's really great, and it started to feel like a, you know, kind of repeatable thing that we all say, but it is locking out people. And there is another difference between the screen reader and keyboard navigation. And in the screen reader, people actually don't care about the focus states. You know, they don't see. And in keyboard navigation, they actually care. You know, even the default behavior. Oh, sorry, I've tried not to talk stuff. Anyway, but what if I want to handle like the both focus states and emphasizing the both? Well, actually, there is not both, but it's like at least three. So it's keyboard, it's mouse, and it's touch screen. And they all can handle like a special implementation. You know, like in this modern age, you're free to do whatever you like. You know, and luckily enough, in this area, you can easily alter it with CSS, as everybody knows. And then there is like a JavaScript library that can do this for us, and it's called Ali, and it has like a sub. How do you say, it's a sub-module or sort that can do this particular thing for us. So this logic, what does it do? It waits and listens for the navigation input types. So if you like hover mouse, it will detect and it will change this data focus source key to pointer. If you use keyboard, it will change to, so it waits actually for the first input. And then based on the first input, you can actually do something like this. So you can handle the different kind of focus states for different kind of input types. Like for example, for a pointer, for key, for even for initial, and something called script, which is actually, I mean, it's kind of touch, you know, because it's not key or pointer. Oh, okay. So in this part, I wanted to display something, but since of the technical limitation, we cannot do it, sadly. Anyway, this is really great resource website, and it's basically about the example implementation of all the elements which you need for the successful integration of accessibility. For example, if you need like a model or a dialog, it has an example of model and dialog, how you do it, and so on. But for particular models and dialogs, there is one specific behavior. And I'm going to try to describe it in words, because I don't have a picture. Hopefully, I'm not going to use like 1,000 words anyway. So basically, when you go to when you focus on the model and you go into the model, the preferred behavior would be that your focus is tracked until you decide to go outside of the model. That means that you go top, go to the far end of the model, and then next time you click tab, you press tab, you get back to the beginning. And you know, at one point when I worked on a project, I was silly enough to think that it would be okay for me to do it on my own, and actually invoice to the client. I mean, everybody can do it, obviously, you know. But if you just invoice to the client something which is, you know, looks easy, but then it ended up like a really complex. Yeah, I mean, I learned my lesson. I mean, it's quite interesting, and it's not perfect. It's about the testing, and it's something. It is something that I came up with. It's maybe not great, but it's the only way I can think of how to actually test the keyboard navigation. And you know, there is this thing called end-to-end testing. And there are many libraries, you know, people are really passionate about all of them, and then they fight these wars, like, you know, in the same way the React versus like Vue or something, you know. But this particular thing, WebDriver.io, I fell in love with it. It is good solution on the technical level. It utilizes the WebDriver, the Selenium thing. It has its limitation, but if you go to their Gitter chat, you will be amazed. It's like always like 2 minutes away, somebody answers. And they're really, like, you know, really great community. And by using this thing, you can write the tests, and you can do something stupid, as I showed here. So basically, what do? You simulate the tabs, and then, I mean, the purpose of this test would be that you end up on the input field which you desire, and you make sure that it's focused. And while you enter on the page, you just know that the rules, that if it's used properly, the 5 times you press tab, you will end up in this focus thing. And I mean, with WebDriver.io, you can consume it in 2 different ways. You can consume it in a synchronous way, which allows you this, or also in async way, which will force you to use, because at the end, the browser .keys will return a promise, so you can like use then, or you can be smarter and use async await. But still, it's like, you know, it's not worth it. So I recommend using it in sync way. Anyway, yeah. So this is kind of a problem because at the end it's error prone. You know, it's like whenever you change something in your UI, it will break. You know, I mean, any kind of end-to-end testing is actually very broken by nature because if you change something, it's gonna break, which is kind of okay behavior. I mean, tests are there for that. So, I mean, when we started using the end-to-end testing, we decided to add a specific data attribute for it, to not use the class name and stuff, because this way we can change the class name, obviously. So yeah, that was it for today. Accessibility is fun, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you, and super.